Raise.
Raise 5,500.
And Mariano putting in the 4-bet on the button with 6.
In this episode of Weekly Poker Hand, we're taking a look at a wild hand from 100, 200 with a 200 big blind ante at Hustler Casino live, playing about $93,000 deep. Super duper deep stacked. Mariano raises it up with 7-6 of clubs on the button. Charles makes it 2,000 with ace king of hearts in the big blind. So far, so good. Mariano then gets a little bit out of line and makes it 5,500 with a 7-6 of clubs. So, first things first, is this a good play? Well, in general, when you are 4-betting, in most situations, in position, playing deep stacked, you're usually going to want to have a suited ace or a suited king. You may say, what about suited connectors? Well, suited connectors can fit into a 4-betting range, and as you are deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, as the players are here, it does become reasonable to make this 4-bet every once in a while. That said, for the most part, the low suited connectors are going to prefer to just call and see a flop in position and go from there. But Mariano came to battle. Let's see how Charles responds.
What's so funny?
Charles
so funny, Wes?
just calls
Every time
quickly with
people raise
ace
your
king.
glass-
Charles is in a pretty tricky spot with his ace king of hearts. You may think, always re-raise. Well, in general, re-raising is perfectly fine. And if you did want to re-raise small with exactly aces and ace king suited for value, and then perhaps some hands like some ace x suited or king x suited as bluffs, I think that is perfectly fine. However, if you think Mariano's range is overly wide and will fold a ton if you 5-bet, and if you think Mariano may be very inclined to bluff off post-flop, then calling becomes quite reasonable because ace-king suited flops pretty well. You know you're not going to fold to too many continuation bets on most boards. So I think Charles's call is very reasonable. Although I do think the default play in the spot is probably just to put in the 5-bet and be willing to play a big pot. I know it feels kind of bad if Mariano then puts in the 6-bet, but when you're playing a loose, splashy, battly game with a loose aggressive player against a loose aggressive player, ace-king of hearts is the nuts. This time, though, he calls. Let's go to the flop.
What's so funny?
And a 2-heart flop. Amazing flop for Charles.
Don't think too much.
Four-bet pot. Mariano c-bets with his gutter. 8,000. How does Charles want to play this? Does he want to get the money in now or just call? Oh, here's the check raise from Charles. This should end it. 25,000. Big raise from Charles.
The flop is a disaster for Mariano because he has a little bit of this flop with a gut shot. Charles, however, has the nut flush draw. The flop comes 8 of hearts, 4 of hearts, 3 of diamonds. Charles out of position checks, as he will do with his entire range. Mariano then continuation bets 8,000, which I think is perfectly fine and reasonable. And then Charles decides to make it 25,000. He bumps it up. And as the commentators say in this scenario, Mariano's probably just going to be done with it. Although I'm not totally sure I agree. This is a spot where when you have the nut flush draw, I think calling may actually be better against most players because you know that you have a draw to the nuts, and on top of that, you actually could have the best hand a large chunk of the time when Mariano has either a suited ace or a suited king that he was bluffing with before the flop. And on top of that, you know if he does have aces, kings, queens, jacks, or any other decent pocket pair, he's just not going to fold. So when you do get it in, you're getting it in roughly 50-50. Maybe a little bit ahead, maybe a little bit behind, depending on exactly what his range looks like. So I think against a loose, aggressive, badly player like Mariano, the best plan is probably just to call and look to call again on the turn. But if you think Mariano's going to be the type of player who may just rip it in with something like ace-5 of diamonds or ace-6 of diamonds, maybe if he has a random queen-9 of hearts or something like that, then putting in the check raise immediately is very good because that's going to result in Mariano ripping it in some portion of the time, and then you can call with your nut flush draw, which is going to crush all of Mariano's junk. It does take a very special player to bet the flop and then just rip it in for all of these big blinds on the flop, but maybe Mariano is that type of player. Let's see if that's the case.
Mariano with just a gut shot here.
All in.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What just happened? Mariano shoves all in the call from Charles. $190,000 pot. A massive punt by Mariano. He trolls him and tells him he has an overpair, but obviously he doesn't. A huge punt from Mariano. I've never seen this before from Mariano. $190,000 pot, a massive punt, a 4-bet pot.
Set.
And the rough night is going to continue for Mariano as Charles scoops a $190,000 pot. Oh my.
All right. 20, 40, 60,
A
70,
rare massive misstep by Mariano.
83, 45, 46, 80, 89.
You rarely, if ever, see that from him. And Charles on the right end of that
Can you double
gift.
check it, please?
Yeah.
Biggest pot of the night, 190,000 goes to
60,
Charles
this
after
is
Mariano
60,
punts. Just
80,
a
it is
massive
60.
misstep
It's good.
by a player that
Nice
is
hand, Charles.
usually so calculated.
Mariano was not afraid. He ripped it in with just a gut shot. This is aggressive, to say the least. Against this check raise, I actually kind of agree with the commentators that Mariano does just have to fold, because once Charles puts in 25,000 out of his 90,000 or so stack, I don't really see him folding all that often at all, unless he really is loose and aggressive and nuts. And this time, he was not nuts. He just had the nuts. Before we wrap it up today, I want to know, what is your favorite number of players to play with when you are playing No Limit Texas Hold'em? These players were playing very short-handed today. Do you like to play heads up, 3 or 4-handed, 6 or 7-handed, or at a full table? Take a second and let me know in the comment section down below which you prefer. I personally prefer to play something like 5 to 7-handed. I think whenever you are playing with that number of players at the table, you don't have to be involved in almost every single pot as you do when you're playing heads up or 3 or 4-handed. But at the same time, you do get to play a decent number of hands. I don't particularly like playing with more than 8 players at the table, because then the first 2 or 3 positions really demand you play pretty tight, and having to play pretty tight a third of the time is not so fun. So I personally like something like 5 or 6-handed, but I certainly realize some players like to hide when play 10-handed. I'm not a hider though, I'm a battler. Good luck in your games, have fun. When you get the nut flush draw, don't be afraid to play for all the money.